Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of U.S. History Made Plain. I'm a high school history teacher trying to make history as fun and interesting for my students as possible. So another big dispute between the U.S. and Britain was a dispute over the Oregon Territory. So Oregon at one point actually stretched all the way up to the Alaskan border. There was a time when 4 different countries claimed Oregon. Spain at one point claimed it, the U.S. claimed it, Great Britain claimed it, as well as Russia. If you remember, Spain actually gave its claim up to the U.S. with the Adams-Onis Treaty back in 1819. So Britain based its claim to Oregon on the Hudson Fur Company's super profitable trade with Native Americans in the Pacific Northwest. So they felt like because they were making so much money and it was such a successful trade that Britain should be able to claim Oregon. However, by 1846, there were less than 1,000 British people that lived above the Columbia River. The U.S., however, had 3 reasons why they claimed Oregon. First was the discovery of the Columbia River in 1792 by Captain Robert Gray. So America felt like, hey, he was ours and he found that, so that's ours. That was number 1. Number 2 was the exploration done by Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. So whenever they had their expedition to the Pacific coast, they felt like, America felt like, hey, we done went over here, we made all these maps, we found, we laid the foundation for people to be able to have maps and build roads and all these things, so this should belong to America. And third, America also had a super successful trading post and fort in Astoria, Oregon, which was established by John Jacob Astor in 1811. These 3 things, along with Protestant missionaries and some farmers, actually settled in the Willamette Valley, and it was very, very fertile, and they were able to grow these blooming farms. And because of that, they attracted 5,000 other Americans to catch Oregon fever or to try and farm these super successful farms on their own. Those Americans came and they traveled over 2,000 miles over the Oregon Trail. So I'm gonna age myself, but when I was in elementary school, there was a game called Oregon Trail. It was like the first computer game ever. I feel it was my first one ever playing. It was based off of this. You get on the carriage and you might die of dysentery, you might, get eaten by something. It was a lot of fun, back then. This is what it was based on. So by the election of 1844, many Americans felt like it was their manifest destiny to take over Oregon, to annex Texas, as well as to get Mexico to sell California. By 1845, there were 7,000 Spanish Mexicans that were living in this Oregon territory out in the West. There were way more Native Americans who were there and had been there and were established, but more and more American settlers and farmers were coming out to play the Texas game, and trying to find land, establish land, and build their new empires, their new farms, their new homes. It all goes back to, that manifest destiny and that idea that God said they can take over everything from the East Coast to the West Coast.